pepper on it is purple. It's Kellogg's breakfast. Can you see that? See this little cucumber baby? Hello, welcome back to Sage and Stone Homestead. My name is Heather. Last garden tour, I forgot to show you this space. This is our pumpkin patch, and I wanted to make sure that you got an update this week. The pumpkins have been growing extremely fast. I'll have to go back and look and see when we planted these, but look at how big these are already. And no sign of bug damage. It's not that it won't happen, but I haven't noticed any signs of squash bugs or squash vine borers. It's still a little early in the season to be looking for that kind of thing, but so far so good. There are 14 Dutch fork pie pumpkins planted in this row. I did have some holes where the pumpkins didn't germinate, and I threw in some sunflowers. You can see we're barely starting to see the little bit of greenery on that seed there. I think it's been a month since I mowed in here, so we're due. Eventually I'd like the pumpkins to kind of sprawl out that way, and I'll have to mow ahead of them as they go. It's kind of hard to see among the grass, but I put this pole here so I can remember while I'm mowing that there is a tomato volunteered right here. It's probably a yellow currant tomato. I'm not going to be watering the pumpkins today. They are big enough to where their roots are pretty well deep into the soil. Once a plant gets established, it really doesn't need frequent watering at all. What I'll do is if we don't get about an inch of rain every week, I'll run the sprinklers. So we've come through the greenhouse, the opposite direction. We're kind of going to run through the whole garden tour in the opposite direction today, I think. So we can start off by talking about the peppers. They've gotten quite tall. Usually when I've grown peppers bush style in the past, this is about the maximum height that I've seen them get. Not all of the peppers are getting super tall quite yet. This guy is stayed about pretty much the same size. I think this right here is the best performer as far as vertical growing peppers go. This is the Pippin's Golden Honey. The pepper on it is purple at the moment. As you can see, we've got two main leaders here that we're twisting up this string trellis, and just about every pair of leaves has at least one blossom, and that blossom of course is going to become the fruit. In order to encourage this upward growth, I have been pinching off suckers, a lot like you would with a tomato plant. You don't have to do this if you are growing your peppers bush style. This is just for this vertical trellising method. Pinching off the sideward growth is going to encourage the plant in its upward growth. Like I said, some of them are growing taller better than others. This one is the Marconi pepper. These guys are going to ripen red. You can see I've got some fruit set on here. Actually, I'm pretty sure every single pepper has some fruit set. So this one is the Jalapeno. This one supposedly is a jalapeno. I think that this pepper is actually possibly part of Peppergate. You guys remember that from last year? Last year, I think it was last year, possibly the year before. Some pepper seeds got mixed up at the factory or whatever, the processing facility, and a lot of people who planted jalapenos ended up with like a Hungarian hot pepper. I think that's what that is. Because yes, jalapenos look like this. They're a deeper green and they're a nice smooth round pepper. This one is a lighter green, a lot like those Hungarian peppers. It just has a little bit more character, I guess, to the pepper. We hadn't been affected by Peppergate until this year. I don't remember where I got that seed. It might have been some of the seeds that my friend Jennifer had sent me. I'm not mad. I'll have to look at the tags. I think I do have another jalapeno planted. Yes, right here. This one is also labeled jalapeno. And I don't know. That little pepper is pretty light. Levi might not have full strength jalapenos this year. That's funny. Over in the cherry tomato beds, we've got a lot of upward growth. I've started to tie these guys to the trellis. I know at least this strawberry tomato has started to put on some flowers. Looks like this one's thinking about it. This is a blue cream berry. So far, nothing yet on this Super Sweet 100. The Super Sweet 100 that I planted across the way here is a little bit stunted. It's taken a while to get going, but I think I'm going to leave it for now. I think it is growing. My spindly looking eggplant has put on a flower, so I think it's recovering from its transplant shock. I think out of all of the eggplants, this guy's the one that's put on the most flowers so far. You can see the slicers and the ground cherries over here really filling out the bed. The slicers are getting very tall. See here, they're looking good. So a lot of the plants in my greenhouse do have some curly top virus. They are producing pretty well despite having this virus. It comes in with aphids and whiteflies. And I have had a little bit of aphid and whitefly pressure still, even though I treated a couple of weeks ago. But it hasn't been horrible. The plants have been putting on flowers. And I'm pretty sure every single slicer has at least one fruit set. So this is the Kellogg's breakfast tomato. Over here is the Berkeley's tie-dye. We have a very interesting looking tomato, very tiny baby tomato growing on this one. This one is labeled as the mortgage lifter. Got quite a few fruit set over here. See this? These are the whiteflies and aphids. Yeah. See there's quite a few bugs on this plant. And this is the hillbilly tomato. Got a tiny little green fruit set up there. Over here I have two pink oxheart tomato plants. This particular plant I think is the one that has set the most fruit. There's a cluster of 3 here. There's a cluster of 3 there. 4 here. A couple of fruit up there. And look at all the blossoms at the top. So these plants are my best producers right now. And they do have that virus, see? I probably won't go through all of the different tomato varieties today, but that's some of them. We will talk about the Berry's Crazy Cherry though. I'll put in a clip of last week when I showed you this fruit truss right here. It was a lot smaller last week and it's grown a lot. A lot of the flowers have opened. This one truss, I don't even know if you can tell, it's on this side and that side of the trellis. It is huge. There's going to be so much fruit on that one truss. Which is the whole point of Berry's Crazy Cherry. A lot of you were really awesome in helping me figure out when my tomatillos are going to be ready. I guess they're going to get big enough inside the husk that the husk will split. I have noticed some of the husks turning brown. I guess I'm going to leave it and see what happens with those. The Malabar spinach on both sides of this trellis here has really started to leaf out. I think there's enough foliage on them right now where I can start picking greens here and there. I've never tried this before. Okay, so it's really not impressive in flavor. It tastes a lot like an iceberg lettuce with a little bit of like a mucilage type quality like you would get with okra, but not as intense. I actually really like, I think it's more of a texture thing that I enjoy rather than flavor, because the flavor is pretty underwhelming, but I like that snappy texture. It's almost succulent. It will probably be better like sauteed as far as flavor goes, but I like that. Yesterday we had some friends come in the greenhouse and want to see everything, and they may have gotten all the ground cherries that were ripe. One of these days I will be able to show you a ripe ground cherry. Some of these first little ground cherries are kind of small, but this is what they look like when they're ripe. I have this lovely, almost peachy orange fruit. It's so hard to describe that flavor. Very good, very pineapple-y. It's definitely something that screams summer to me. I planted so many ground cherry plants in an effort to have enough to make something with, but everybody in my family loves eating them fresh so much that, I don't know, might not make anything with them this year. Over here we have a bed of small cabbages. And I'd like to talk to you guys about this bed because it's not doing a whole lot. Now, a lot of the beds that we put in here this year, I layered what I put in them. I put hay on the bottom, manure from our barn on top of that, and then I put some organic potting and raised bed soil on top of that, plus some mulch, and that's how the layers in most of the beds work here in the greenhouse. This particular bed, I didn't have any hay left, and I did not feel like mucking the barn, so the entire bed is the Kellogg's organic raised bed soil. And when I plugged in these plants, it's when I noticed some some curling starting on some of my tomato plants over here, and I didn't know what it was yet, so I was afraid that maybe it was too much fertilizer. So I didn't fertilize these at all, and they really haven't done much. Now, it's not uncommon for a plant when it's transplanted to have a little bit of transplant shock and take a while to get going and show some upward growth, but I'm pretty sure that these guys have been in here for a month. Some of them have died back. There might be a little bit of upward growth, but not enough to where they're going to beat the heat that we have coming up. Cabbages and other brassica plants really struggle when it starts to get above 85 for very long, and we have a high this weekend of 96. And so I do not think that we are going to be able to get these plants to maturity. So what I'm going to do this week, I'm not going to do it in video today, is I'm going to just rip all of these out and put something in here that is heat loving, and we'll try again with this cabbage variety in the fall time. And I'm going to amend the soil. It is not uncommon for bagged soil to not have everything your plants are going to need. Even if the bag says it's going to feed your plants for X amount of months, sometimes the components of the soil itself will use up any kind of nutrition that they put in the soil to feed your plants in order to break themselves down. And once the soil has a chance to break down fully, those nutrients will become available to the plants, but it's a process that can take some time. So I'm not super shocked that there wasn't a lot of available nutrition to those plants. I just know when I do put something in there, I'm gonna need to boost it. I have a bed back here that we have not talked about much. This is where I planted some parsnips, I think in February. This particular bed also has some layering going on, but a little bit different because this is a big tall one. There's wood at the bottom, and then hay, and then manure, and then I put some soil. Parsnip grows a longer tap root, and it's really not going to grow a root through things like hay and sticks and mulch. It's really going to do best in like a rich compost, loose soil type situation. And the parsnips that I've picked are really stubby. They're short and fat, and I think that's just because the layer of soil that they have to grow in isn't really deep. Eventually this bed is going to be really awesome for something like this, but it's not right now because everything in there is still trying to break down. You can see we've got a parsnip that looks pretty good on the surface. Like, that is wide, right? Let's see if we can wiggle it out. This is what we have underneath. And because of the soil situation in the bed, I am not surprised, but I'd like to continue building the soil in this bed. There's a lot of settling. So I think what we're gonna do today is harvest all of the parsnips, good or bad. I'll preserve what I can of them. There's actually a slug in this one. Can you see that? And then this week I'm going to be adding soil to the bed and planting something heat loving in here. Well, that one's not bad. Why couldn't have I picked that one first? Wow, okay. So I took a picture a lot like this of the carrots that we harvested out of this bed prior to the parsnips being planted, and I think that this is more poundage, and that makes sense because the parsnips are supposed to get bigger anyway. This is still not as big as they were supposed to get as far as like width goes. But a lot of these, as I was picking, are bigger than what I was expecting, and so that's a win. Now, about the greens. I've been researching because I knew I was about to harvest on ways to use the greens, and I found some conflicting information. I see a lot of recipes using parsnip greens, but then I see some warnings from some extension offices which are very, very official in their opinions on things like this, that there's something in the leaves that can be toxic. So I think what I'm going to elect to do with these this time, as I do some more research, is to process the roots. I plan on canning or freezing these. And then I'm just gonna put these in the compost because I'm not even sure that they're safe for the animals. They may be, but I just don't know. And the compost is also a very valid option for these greens. It's heavy, my foot is falling asleep. Ugh. I was going to just put them back in that grow bag over there, but I think I've got them. I don't really want to put them down until I put them down in the place that they're gonna stay. So, to the shed. That's the parsnip harvest on a countertop. It's pretty good, huh? I do know that when it comes to harvesting things like root crops, the sooner that you can get them off of their green foliage, the better. Once they're pulled, in order to go into survival mode, the greens will actually take the moisture out of the root and transfer the moisture up into there, and your root can get a little bit limp. If that happens, it's not the biggest deal. You just put the roots inside, like you submerge them inside some water for a little while and they'll rehydrate. But I'm just gonna break these off right now because that also works. So what do parsnips taste like? They are a lot like a carrot, but with almost like a peppery type spice to them, nearly as if you combined a carrot with a radish, but with a more intense carroty flavor. It's very, very good with rich meats like venison. You'll see a lot of recipes with parsnips and venisons together, kind of like how you would make a pot roast, but with venison and parsnips instead of beef and carrots or potatoes. And a lot of people will actually boil and mash their parsnips a lot like a potato because they're lower carb. There you go. It looks a lot less impressive in this state, doesn't it? That's fine. This is way more parsnips than I have grown. Whoa, I thought it was a bug. This is way more parsnips than I've been able to grow before, and I'm gonna try again when I put more actual soil in that bed to get some longer roots this coming fall. What I'm gonna do before I stick this in the fridge, because the fridge is also going to take the moisture out of the roots, is I'm gonna cover them with this bag, and this will help hold moisture in. There we go.
Good morning.
I have finally cleaned up mostly and planted about a third of the lane. So as you can see here, we have this goat pasture, then there's a goat pasture there, and then we have this alleyway in between pastures. And we did this on purpose because when we breed our goats, we want to put one buck in each pen and have enough space between the pens so that the bucks can't fight each other through the fence and hurt themselves. Previously to this also allowed a space for like a truck or a tractor, a fire truck that's been needed in the past, to like come down through here. But we realized that there is actually still plenty of space around the outside for vehicles like that to get through. And so we didn't necessarily need this space for vehicles. It's great still for the goats to be separated, but I hated mowing it. I hate mowing in general, as you can probably tell. So I figured if I'm not gonna mow it, I might as well plant it. And I planted this last year with a whole bunch of different things. There was squash out here, lots of melons, cucumbers, lots of heavy feeding things. I just stuck in the clay soil here without any amending. I really didn't expect it to do well, but it did. The lane was incredibly productive last year to my surprise, and I kind of let it sit and overgrow over the winter, and just now finally cleaned it out. But we've gotten it 1/3 of the way planted with the chicken and dumplings cowpeas. I actually started these from seed inside some start trays because we do have issues when we plant stuff out in the ground with, you know, roly-polies coming and eating them mostly. So historically, with things that like peas, it's been best for us to start them in start pots and then set them out when they're bigger. I do still have some tiny ones that I put in between some bigger ones, so we'll just see how they do. They've been out here for a couple days so far, and so far so good. On the end, I have these 2 grow bags, and in here, I stuck a very special type of melon. Those of you that have been around the channel for a while might know the type of melon that I've planted in here. If you have a guess, put it in the comment box. I'm sure a lot of you are gonna get it. I'll talk about this more next week once it germinates. found a parsnip that fell on the ground. But on the way to the rest of the garden spaces, the raised bed garden, we have this random piece of fencing here. This used to be the kids' garden. The kids' garden has moved around quite a lot. Their official garden space is right there, and we will visit that. But I've just left this fencing in here, and I noticed early on this spring that we had a volunteer wild rose pop up on this trellis. This particular rose, earlier in the spring, it did flower just a little bit before it grew all of this foliage, and the flower was white. I'm not great at identifying a lot of wild edibles, but I'm pretty sure that this is a type of wild rose that is very great to make teas and things out of. More of an herbal tea, not necessarily a floral tea. In any case, I really did like the idea of it living here, so I've encouraged it to take up residence on this old fencing. There's also a ton of clover in here that I don't cut. I leave this for our pollinators. And we also have a lot of this white flower. Now, at first glance, you might look at this and think that it is something like chamomile, which would be a very good guess. The little petals on chamomile are a lot more flat. They look more like a daisy. This guy, the little petals, the white parts of the flower, are almost feather or hair-like. This is another wild edible called flea bane, and you can harvest flea bane and make a tea a lot like you would with chamomile. It does taste different, it's a little bit more grassy, and like I said, I am still in the middle of learning about these things, but I haven't mowed it down because I know what it is, and I plan on harvesting this for tea this year. You can come along and just pick them off with your hand a lot like you would with chamomile. But they also make a really neat, it's like a plastic berry rake, and you just can rake along the tops of the flower and collect them that way, and that seems a lot more efficient. So I've got that on order, and I'm just waiting for it to arrive. My mom has named this rooster Majestic. We hear you, sir. Good morning. He's not a fan of the camera. So this space is the kids' garden. This is their official space where they're gonna stay. They have this green stalk here that I tried to transplant strawberries into, and it was going okay for the most part, but this so far is the only strawberry that's hanging on to any kind of green foliage. A lot of them pushed out some green and then decided that this wasn't the place they wanted to live for whatever reason. Now my guess, and this is just a guess, is the strawberries really enjoyed the amount of rain that we were getting. We were getting lots of rain, at least, I wanted to say at least every other day, but it was more frequently than that. And then suddenly we were having just warm, hot, sunny days. A lot of plants get used to kind of a routine with the way that they are cared for, and especially a tender plant that was just transplanted and is trying to get established. The consistency is probably better than inconsistency, and these guys just couldn't hang. So I have purchased some flowers for the kids' green stock to be placeholders in the meantime. Eventually, we do want this to be a strawberry tower for them. They have these brown cherry beds that really haven't been looking super great. Just like with the cabbage bed inside my greenhouse, the only thing that I put in these two beds was that potting soil, and I did not amend each plant when I put that in the planting hole. And they have been suffering. They've been turning yellow. They really haven't been growing. But before I added the mulch this past week, I did sprinkle in some Trifecta Plus fertilizer, and these guys are starting to green up the tiniest bit. So I think it's working. The sun is a little bright, so it might be a little hard to tell, but these guys are greening up some. It's looking more green over here. Now, they're beds that we have a lot of great success in. These do have things like hay and manure layered in, as well as that potting soil. So as soon as the plants were able to really get to the nutrition below, they reached it and are doing really well. This is an ox heart tomato. Lots of flowers up there. She's had a lot of flowers on this plant, but I haven't noticed any fruit set quite yet. This cucumber, though, it's not going to be long before they've got fruit set in here. I think this one is called the dragon's egg cucumber. Can you see this little cucumber baby right there? It's like a round, kind of oval shaped cucumber. There's more coming in down here. Over here, my son Bentley planted some peppers. Now, he was a lot less inclined to do the hard work and shovel in manure, so his peppers really were not doing that great. They were actually a lot yellower than this. I have come through and sprinkled in some nutrition, some more Trifecta Plus along underneath the mulch, and they are starting to green up as well. And I've noticed a little tiny fruit, so they're not great looking, but I think that they're going to be able to recover. Some of them have very big peppers. Look at that one. So before we head out to the raised bed garden, I do have these cell trays here that I planted some okra in just a couple of days ago. It's probably going to pop up this week, and then I'm going to give it probably another couple weeks to grow in the cell trays here before I stick them out on the lane. That is the final destination for these guys. At least some of them. If I get them all to germinate, I'm gonna be giving some away to some friends and family because I don't think I need this much okra. We like it, but goodness. I did notice we're starting to see just a little bit poking up there, so it's not gonna be long at all. We will walk through the archway as normal in just a minute, but my tea rose has started blooming again, and I wanted to make sure I showed you. It's definitely one of those times where I wish that I could give you all smell-o-vision, because this is glorious. It smells so good. Down here underneath the tea rose are the gooseberries that I got from Stark Brothers during a sale that they had. These guys are dead for sure. There's a couple different ways that you can test a bare root plant to tell if it's dead. One way is to scratch your fingernail along the stem, and if you scratch down through to some green, it's alive. If you do not, it is dead. And you can also, you know, snap off some twigs. You can see inside if it's alive or dead. All of these are dead. One great thing about Stark Brothers is they do have a guarantee, but I will say that more often than not, my Stark orders do this, and I don't know what it is. We have a lot more success with places like fastgrowingtrees.com, and I'm not saying that to like dog on Stark Brothers. It's really great that they stand behind their product. It's just a bummer when you try to start something at the right time of year and it doesn't take off. It's delayed. They'll probably replace it, but then those new gooseberries will be a little bit further behind, you know? I'm sure it'll be fine. We were not going to be getting gooseberries this year anyway, but I'm hoping that they still have some plants. Sunflowers have gotten big. Now these won't get super tall. It looks like they're already thinking about putting on some flower buds. Over here, these are the flowers that I bought to stick in the kids' green stock. Over in the entryway, the lettuces have really started to show off. Look at all of these flower stalks. So very soon, these little tiny buds will become flowers. The flowers look like this, and almost like little daisies. Looks really beautiful on this purple variety. Every single one of these flowers is going to make tons and tons of seeds, so we're gonna have plenty of lettuce seed coming up. And really, this entryway is just gonna be gorgeous. I look forward to it. Just inside the garden, I have this bee balm plant. For a couple years, I expected it to bloom red, but it doesn't. It blooms purple, and I remembered it this year, so it wasn't surprising when I saw that. I mentioned that the high temperature this weekend is 96, and so the plan is in the next couple of days just to completely take out all of this kale. It has done amazingly for me. This is the best kale year that I've ever had, which is, I hoped for that, so that's awesome. I have not harvested this for a couple of weeks, so everything is really nice and full, and I'll just harvest the entire plant instead of picking off some of the bigger leaves. It's not that I had a really hard year with my kale to begin with, but as far as pests and disease and weather resistance and whatnot, this curly-leafed kale performed the best, which was true for my friend in her garden. And I actually had her over yesterday and she recognized this kale. So yeah, I think I want to plant even more of this kind next year, curly-leafed kale or parsley-leafed kale. I can't exactly remember, but it was a winner. Like I said, the other varieties really didn't do too bad. We've got some dinosaur kale down here. All of this is going to come out as well. Next door, the zinnia bed has really started to take off. Look at these gorgeous flowers. Now a lot of them are of like the queen lime variety, queen lime blush, queen lime something else. I don't remember planting a pink variety, but there is one there. Over here on this side of the trellis, you can see our loofah is starting to reach for the sunlight. I did grow loofah and birdhouse gourd in this bed last year, and this bed has been amended, but I only amended it with that bagged soil that isn't doing super great all by itself in some of the other garden spaces. And so what I ended up doing this week was actually kind of trenching around these heavy feeding plants and sprinkling in some fertilizer. I put Trifecta Plus around the plants so that it can become available to them if and when they need it. Loofah does sometimes start out kind of slow, but then it takes off and it loves the heat. We got some of the smaller style zinnia over here doing their thing. I need to come out and pick a bouquet. The more we pick, the more we encourage blooming. And I'm pretty sure it's picking time for these beans as well. It's been a couple of days. About every other day is when I come out and pick on our bush beans. Yeah, it's ready for picking again. There's some big beans in here. So we have some bigger beans, but we also have a not small ant situation. Ants with wings? I don't know. That's bizarre. They're kind of all over this plant. I think I'm gonna leave the beans alone until later. But they're doing really well. We're probably gonna have another couple of weeks of harvesting off of these. These guys don't have any ants over here. But I'll come back and deal with those tonight. I have pulled a little bit more elephant garlic out of the elephant garlic bed. Look at this big one right here. So that's been awesome. More of the foliage is starting to die back on this side, so I think probably next week we'll take all of this out. And I need to also deal with this bed. So this is the lettuce bed that hadn't been going to seed as quickly as the other ones. And so we were picking our salads from here rather than over there because these guys were not bitter until recently. So I do need to take all of this lettuce out of the bed, and then I already have what I'm going to be putting in here. So eventually my goal with this garden space is to make it more of a perennial space. So I've purchased things like those gooseberries that I hope to put in this space, but I also bought these Nanking cherries. I first saw these over on the Roots and Refuge YouTube channel, and it's like a tart cherry that grows in like a bush habit. When I took these guys out of their box and tried to ease them into our full sun, they still got a little bit singed. At least this taller plant did, but it's coming back. It's gonna be okay, and these guys are what's gonna go in this lettuce bed here. Our cherry tomato green stalk has been setting fruit like crazy. Look at this beautiful cluster. So gorgeous. Even though most of the plants are quite sick, it's still really pretty. Blackberries are getting redder, which is a good sign. It's going to be an amazing harvest when that comes on. Our dill is getting really tall. This is the giant bouquet dill. And I'm actually surprised that I haven't noticed more presence of the swallowtail butterflies. This is one of the few plants that they will lay their eggs on, and we leave them. Every time we see those beautiful striped caterpillars, we leave them on the plants. Oh, I'm noticing a volunteer in here. Check this out. Do you see that? That is a bean plant, a pole bean, and it has some flowers. Where is that even coming from? Down here, I think. This might be a yellow wax bean, which would not surprise me. I've grown that. I think it was 2 years ago I grew it on this trellis, and I let some of the seed ripen in the pods out here, and inevitably some of them fell, so we've got those growing, which I'm gonna leave it. The walking onions have been doing really awesome. I'm seeing a lot fewer of those heads that they put on these guys. Here's a real big one down here. I don't see as many of those coming up. My guess is that they maybe put them on once a year. I have been coming through and just picking these off as green onions as needed for my cooking. But eventually we should be able to harvest some bulbs as well. I look forward to that. Our Carlos muscadine grapes, I have 2 of them. That's what's growing along this trellis here. They have finally reached the top. The entire spring I was pruning these grapes to encourage an upward growth, a lot like I talked about with the peppers inside the greenhouse, just taking off some of the sideward growth so the energy is put into vertical growth. Totally works. So if we come around to the other side, you can see we're at the tippy top. So now that we've reached the top of the trellis, I can allow some of like this sideward growth to go out this way. And I don't think we'll be getting any muscadine grapes this year, but next year we should. This is my first year growing these, and I'm not entirely sure, but I don't think we can expect any grapes out of them this year. Same deal with this one. We're at the top. Now we just need the sideways growth. In order to get over to the grapes, we did pass by the flowers that I have over here. The Callaway Golden Chamomile has opened. You can see a native pollinator on that one. I have quite a few of those plants dispersed in this bed, as well as some zinnia and volunteer tomatoes, of course. Our strawberries out here, these are ever-bearing strawberries, and we are still getting a few fruit, but mostly I think the plants have put their energy in their runners. You can see right here, this vine comes out of the parent plant and it puts out these little babies, and this one's actually rooted in the walkway here, which is fine. It's probably going to get mowed. I'd rather them root into the bed like this one has. Usually the plants can't focus on both fruit production and producing more babies. So if we wanted more fruit production, we could always cut those runners off and encourage them to flower that way. I have done that with my strawberry tower inside the greenhouse, but I can allow these guys to make runners. I really do want this bed nice and full. Over here is some elephant garlic that definitely needs harvesting. You can wait too long to harvest your garlic, and we might be close to too long in this bed. What happens is the bulb itself will start to separate, and when that happens, it's compromised, and it's fine to eat. It's just not awesome for long-term storage. Feels like a mono bulb, which I think is what I expected, because I'm pretty sure that this bed was planted with corms. Oh no, this is not a mono bulb. This one has multiple cloves. They're just not that big. See this here? This is a mono bulb. I talked about this last week. A lot of times when these little corms, those little things at the bottom of the garlic bulb, when these germinate, this is what you get. And then you plant these and you can get a full head of elephant garlic the next year. Oh, that's a big mono bulb. It's like an onion. That's so funny. That's a big one. Not bad harvest. I think that was a 1 by 2 foot space. And as far as the asparagus goes, I know that I said I was going to harvest through June, and that in years past I regretted not harvesting through June. But I think I'm gonna stop. Some of the areas that I know that I have crowns aren't performing as well as I'd like. So in each bed is 4 feet by 4 feet, and I have 1 crown every probably 18 inches, so there's 9 crowns in here. There's 3 here, 3 in the middle, and then 3 on the end. And so what this crown is producing right now, it's not very much and it's not very big. This guy probably could have harvested, but the one next door, so we've got a baby plant here. This was probably from seed. This hasn't put up a shoot in a while, and when it does, if it does, I don't want to be harvesting that because it looks like this particular crown is starting to run out of steam. This one is putting on some really spindly little asparagus. This particular crown in this corner, it was a long time that it hadn't put up any spears. So when it finally put up this spear, I wanted to let it grow. And the reason that you want to make sure that each crown has at least a few fronds that you let reach their full maturity and leaf out like this is because they're a very important part of keeping the whole plant alive. All plants need sunlight, and without the sunlight, the crown is going to die, and these fronds are how the crowns collect the sunlight. So we need to let some of them grow. And since some of them seem to be slowing way down, I really don't want to push my luck and kill the crown. So this bed is looking a lot better. I don't really know what the difference is, but I think I'm done harvesting in here as well. The elderberry is absolutely loaded with green berries. There's going to be so much fruit on this one plant. It's insane. Over in our compost area, we have this glorious volunteer squash that until recently I didn't know what it was, but it's made itself known exactly what type of squash this is. So if we carefully step in here, can you see this right here? There's a long curved green squash right there. There's actually one right here too. That. This is a tromboncino squash. So good guess, whoever guessed that. See, there's a bigger one here. So that's exciting. The garden next week is going to look pretty different. Some spots are going to look a little bit bare. We have a longer growing season here in southwestern Kentucky. We can get away with succession planting lots of different things throughout the season. When I first started growing in this garden, I first planted it July 4th, 2019, and I planted a lot of things like beans and cucumbers, watermelons from seed in July, and we did get fruits and harvests and everything out of those plants. So there's going to be some empty space that we will fill, and we'll be harvesting from that eventually too.